Alright, hello everyone. So today what I'm going to go over is setting up a ice creature to use Mecanim. I'll also go over a few other things such as setting up the environmental time controller that ice has, as well as just kind of using the simple terrain setup that he provides as well via the Ice Wizard. If anyone has any questions during the stream, feel free to ask them in the chat. And if I'm able to quickly answer it, I will. So without further ado, let's get started. So I started a new scene here because I wanted to show you guys how to set up kind of the terrain that ice allows you to quickly set up. So what we can do is we can go to the ice toolbar here, go to, I believe it is Ice Creature Control, Wizard. So since this is a new scene, we need to add the creature register. And here when we select the scene, we can select either to create a plane or a terrain. So this time what I'm going to do is create a terrain instead of a plane. And it'll pause for a moment as it generates a terrain. So already ice will randomly generate a terrain for us, which is nice, great for quickly prototyping, or if you just don't care that much for high detailed terrain. And you have all these options here where you can change the terrain size, max number of hills, the height of hills, the radius of the hills, valley settings, as well as tree, grass, and bushes. And then as with the plane option, we also have turrets, location, waypoints, and obstacles that we can set up so that it scatters them across the terrain. However, like before, I'm not going to use any of the turrets, locations, waypoints, or obstacles for now. Makes it easier. Let's make sure there's a little bit flatter areas that we have here. This will work. Start setting up right here. Just make sure the lighting isn't bad. What I'm going to do, I'm turn off baked and pre-computed. There, that's better. Alright, so with our nice little terrain set up, let's make sure it's set to walkable. Yep, set to the walkable layer. And now we need to grab a creature. And now grab I'll just use a deer since that's what I used before. Nope, come on. Get you in the scene. Oh man, he's tiny. I do believe that with this particular one, probably scale it up by 4. Yeah, that's better. All right, got ourselves a nice red deer here. So we're going to set this one up to use Mecanim, so we need to make sure that it's set to generic here in the rig settings for the model. Root node should be fine. And then animations are not tied to this particular one, they're separate. Alright, so what I will do is, for the sake of organization, we'll rename this to Ice Red Deer. There we go. So what we need to do now is we need to create, since we're using Mecanim, it doesn't have a runtime animator controller. So we need to create one for it. I will right click, go to create, and animator controller. And I will name this Ice Red Deer _ advanced. I like to separate the controllers based on advanced and direct, because you can use you can have there's multiple ways of setting up ice creature with Mecanim, and I'll show you that as we go along. So I will assign this to the controller, and then so here's the animator right here. We're gonna put the animations which we're gonna use in here, but first what we want to do, well, no, we don't have to, we can do that, we can put in the animations first. Alright, so we need to find that again. Shouldn't have closed it. Alright, here's the animations. Alright, so we need to start off with the basics first, and then we can expand on that. We need to run animation, so we need a gallop. I'll find the gallop. Where's the gallop forward? There it is. Found it. Gallop forward. Gallop forward. Here's idles. We want idle. No, all right. Jump. We don't want jump. We're not using that right now. And walk. Just for now. And walk forward. Alright. So what we want to do here then is, since we're going to be primarily using this animator controller for running using parameters, we need to put in a couple of parameters that we're going to use to control all the animations. So we'll put in a parameter for forward speed. No, there's the search bar. Come on now. We'll add a float in. Call it forward speed. We'll need another float for angular speed, which is essentially rotation. And I like to always include an int, which I typically name int data, which will control other things. Like if you have variations in walk, run, and even idle animations, you can use this kind of an int data to kind of determine which animation is played. So then what we want to do is we want to go make a transition here from idle to walk forward. And arrange those. Idle to walk forward to gallop, and then we need transitions back. Right, so we'll have idle. We want to make sure it has exit time is unticked for this, because if it's ticked, then it will make sure that before it changes, that it will wait for the actual idle animation to finish playing before switching over, which isn't necessarily something that you want. So we will go with, we want forward speed to be greater than 0.1. And when walking forward to idle, we want same thing, no exit time. And we want forward to be less than, and we'll go with 0.1. Alright. And then from walk forward to gallop forward, we need forward to be greater. Then I'm going to say kind of a 5. because while tweaking the animation and the speed of the, if you're not using root motion, make sure it has exit time is unticked. If you're not using root motion, you'll have to experiment with the actual forward movement of the creature and take into consideration its animation, because sometimes when not using root motion, because the creature's actual movement speed does not match the animation, it can make them look like they're sliding around. So having a 5 limit for walk forward gives you a nice big cushion that you can mess around with. And for gallop forward, untick has exit time, and we want it less than 5. Alright, so that's just the bare bones minimum that you need. Just drag that out of there. Typically don't use that anyway. Alright, so with that out of the way, what we can do is using, well, here I'm going to kind of set it up without using the ice creature wizard, just so you can see how to do that. What we can do is we can go to add component, and then ice creature control right here, which will add it here for us. Home location, and if you auto it, it'll auto create an empty game object for the red deer and set it to the home, which is handy. Extend this. Alright, so now we need to define travel, rendezvous, and leisure. However, what we can do is do that here as well. Or most of it, leisure, not so much. So we'll enable, what do we want? We want, yeah, these ones. Auto, 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 which will auto set up these behaviors for us. However, they will not pick any of the animations. Those you have to go and do on your own. Since we're not using any of these right now, we'll skip those. So we want travel to be walk, rendezvous to be idle, and leisure to be walk. For home locations, I typically like to untick reached and use timer, because it kind of enforces the AI to kind of use a wandering behavior. And if you just increase the min-max interval here, you can create a longer idle duration, so that it takes, depending on the position that it picked, if it reaches it sooner, then it'll sit still for longer. But otherwise, if you just have reached, then it will only update its position upon reaching its move position, where it's trying to go to. But yeah, I typically like to have timer ticked there for that. And while setting up, I typically like to use debug, the debug option here, and advanced gizmos, so that I can kind of see its wander radius here. Although sometimes when you're testing it, especially if you have scene view open, you will want to have the debug option for draw selected only. That way you're not like drawing every AI's gizmos, which can drastically decrease your frame rate while the scene view is open. Alright, so now let's head over to the behaviors and set up the idle, run, and walk, which are the only ones we have right now. Makes things a little simple. Alright, so for idle, what we can do is, if we enable the animation tab here, we have two options. We can either go direct or advanced. As the controller's name suggests, I will do this one with advanced, but just be aware that you can directly control which animation is playing in the Mecanim state. So if you see here, we have the animation option here, and we can choose between gallop forward, idle, and walk forward, which are all the animations that are on this Animator controller. Now you do have to be aware that for it to work properly with direct mode, they all have to be on the same layer. If they're in substates, they seem to not work very well. There's some issues with that. So if you're going to use direct, make sure that all the animations that you're going to use are in the same layer. But with parameters, you can go ahead and separate different groups of animations into their own little substates. If you don't know what a substate is, if you right click in the Animator controller, you can create a substate machine, which shows up this little weirdly diamond shaped esque state. And if you click on it, you can go into it and kind of set up animations in here. And as the creature gets more complex, we'll definitely want to start doing that to help organize things. But for now, I'm going to delete it because we don't need it. It just takes up space. So just be aware that you can use direct, and to do so, make sure that all your animations are on the same layer. And you don't need transitions when using direct. But for now, we'll use advanced. So set it to advanced, so all those options disappeared. I will not apply root motion for this one because when you do that, if you do not have any turning animations, your creature will not turn when you use apply root motion. So for this example, this short example, I'm not going to use root motion, but then I'll switch back over to it once we add turn animations to the deer. So what we want to do here is we want to add a parameter and we want to enable it. So we want to set forward, when idling, we want forward speed to ideally be set to 0. So we're actually going to leave it like that. Another thing we want to do is set angular speed to 0 unless it has idle turn animations, in which case you could increase that or decrease it or do it dynamically, which I'm about to show you. And then int data, I also want to set to 0 because 0 is going to be the default idle behavior, idle animation. So movement, probably don't have to mess with that. If it causes any issues, we can go back and mess with it later. So in movement for walk, we'll leave it at 3. For more realistic turning behavior, a more natural looking one, you will want something small, an angular speed of less than 4. I typically like it around 2 or 3. So we'll set it there for now. And then animations you want to enable and change it from direct to advanced. And add the same parameters as you did up here, although int data you probably don't need. No, do not apply root motion. So we want forward speed and angular speed. However, we don't want to set their value here. What we want to do is we want to give them a dynamic value. So toggle both of their parameters, dy and toggle here, and change the, okay, so angular speed is correct here. We want move angular speed. And then forward speed, we want move forward speed. So this will dynamically set the move forward speed or the forward speed to be equal to the move forward speed here. And then we do the same exact thing for the run. Enable it, make sure its movement options are okay. I'll set that to 2. And we will go switch that to advanced and add the same things. You could feasibly actually just copy this behavior here and then rename it to run, and then just change its forward value to be more. That way you don't have to reset all of these. But I like to do this like this so that you guys can see what I'm doing and have it ingrained. Angular speed is okay, seems to be the default, and we want forward speed to be equal to the move forward speed. And that should be all we actually have to do. And let's double check things here. Yes, all right. So let us press play and see if we have broken anything. Anyone have any questions so far? well. That can't be healthy. Alright. Hate to scale them up with the scaling tool. Looks like I'll have to do that though. So we'll go back to deer, models, grab the one I'm using, change it back to 1, hit apply. And then I'll have to manually scale it up. Alright, you good there, bro? You're not gonna like freak out on us, right? Aha, there we go. Walk speed is a bit fast. At least I think it is. So what I'll do is decrease that to maybe a 1. That's a problem. Problem that does not normally happen. But 1 definitely seems to be the right forward speed there for a walk. Make sure motion and pathfinding are nice. Obviously, yeah, we need to go through and set the body orientation and whatnot here. We want quadruped. Yeah, sure. And if you use roll angle, the animal will actually kind of tilt slightly into the turns. Ground handling, recast, which is why he was kind of walking through the ground at that point. We want walkable surface because that's the layer that our terrain is on. Water handling default, obstacle avoidance basic. Add obstacle. Overlay prevention, don't necessarily need that right now. It just kind of prevents the creature from going inside of other colliders. There we go, now he shouldn't walk straight down into the ground like that. Yeah, its walk speed's much better. And if we go over to his animator, we can see that angular speed is going all over the place, although we aren't currently using it. That's for the turn animations that we'll put in. But forward speed is 1. So he's in his walk state. If we pause and just kind of drag him outside of his little radius here, not in the air, preferably. Get him out of his comfort zone. He will get out of the ground. Come on. He should try to run. His run behavior should kick in. Should being ideal. Oh, well, you know, it's because I have that there. There you go. There, see, now he ran. And all of that's being controlled by parameters and Mecanim. So what I'm going to do now is kind of introduce, because I have gotten in the habit of not liking this home location and its animations. I kind of like them to be a little bit more dynamic. So what we can do, and this is really interesting, and one of the strengths of ice is we can set up an interactor to use it as the home instead of the actual home object. So what we can do is we can add an interactor, and you'll see why this is cool as opposed to just using the normal home. So what we want to do is we want to use the home ice red deer. Now one thing I forgot to do, and because we added the ice creature control manually instead of through the register, you'll see that there is, in the creature register, there is no reference to our deer, our ice red deer. But there is, thank goodness, a reference to its home, but not the deer. So to actually get the deer referenced in here, you want to hit this update button so that the deer is now referenced in the register. Otherwise, it's going to have trouble actually interacting with anything that's related to ice. Might cause some issues. Alright, so now we have the first interactor. We want to extend this and make sure that the priority is set to something like 10, low, so that other things take higher priority unless you want it to kind of sit at home for a long period of time, or favor its home location over everything else. So this behavior I want to kind of be a walk behavior. And then what I want to do here is select target move specification. And to kind of mimic kind of the home location, what I'm going to do is kind of set the random positioning range to 100. Of course, active and timer like before, like the normal home location. However, unlike the normal home location, what I'm going to do is use the advanced selector and say that and target move position distance is less than or equal to, I'm going to say 20. So if the target move position distance that it's chosen is less than or equal to 20, it's going to walk. And then for the second one here, selection range is going to be infinite. That's fine. I want the behavior to run for this one to be run. And then select the advanced option here. And same as the walk, I want the target's move position distance. However, I want this to be let's say greater than or equal to, well no, greater than, in this case, greater than 20. So that if the target move position distance is greater than 20, the deer is going to run to the position instead of walk. But once it gets within 20, it'll start walking. This creates sort of a little bit more dynamic behavior. So that if the distance it's trying to cover is larger, it's going to run to get to the position faster. And then of course you can add other behaviors in here for something like this as well, such as an idle behavior, but for this I'm going to just kind of use run and walk. And make sure that the home position here enabled, and make sure its priority is set to 0 so that it effectively never gets chosen. So instead it'll just use this interactor as its kind of home base. So now if we press play, where's our buddy here? So now if we actually drag him away from where he's trying to go, he should start running over there. So I believe that's probably a distance of good distance. Yeah, now he's running. Try to get to where he was going. Yep, and that's why I kind of like to use interactors for homes instead of the home in the essentials, because I have a little bit more control over the animations that's being used. So yeah. Alright, so now let's go ahead and add in the rotation and whatnot. Or, actually before I do that, because I wanted to cover the environment as well. And you guys, I'm hoping, sort of have an understanding of how to use the Mecanim stuff now with ice. So before I add in the rotation and whatnot, if we go to ice environment, components, and create environment controller, we'll get this environment object here, which by default has nothing enabled. So what I'm going to do is enable the astronomical settings, which is essentially the time of day. And then we want to assign the directional light as the sun, which will immediately darken everything. Yeah. So we want the start time. I'm going to set the start time to about 8 here, so it's in the morning. And the length of day in minutes is going to by default be set to 5. Alright, alright, that's good. So that'll work. So now if we press play, you now have a time of day system. A nice simple time of day. Alright, now that we have that, let us actually make the deer actually detect what time of day it is. And so for this we need to set up a couple of behaviors, new behaviors that we're going to use. And one of them, well, I think we only really need to set up one. And in this case we will call it sleep. So we're going to have the deer sleep once nighttime falls. And here what we want to do is make sure that movement is 0. All zeroed out here, because we don't want the deer moving around while it's sleeping. That'd be weird. Switch over to advanced and add in our values here. We're going to want 3 here, the same as before. We want forward speed, angular speed, both of these set to 0. And then int data, which in this case I'm actually going to set to 2. Because 2 with an int data of 2, that means it's going, once the deer goes into idle, we're going to set it up so that once it goes into idle, if int data is 2, the deer is going to try to sleep. So let's go ahead and set that up. So what we want in here, move this out of the way. We're going to set up the sleep behavior down, the sleep animations down here. So I'm going to grab the animations and find the ones that I need. Sit down, here they are. Alright, so the first thing we want is we want idle to sleep. So we want to transition from idle to sleep, idle to sit down, and then a loop for sit down. And then of course we want stand up right here so we can get back up afterwards. And then we want, I believe this is it, right? Sit down to sleep. Sleep loop. Come on, get up there. And a sleep to sit up. or sit down, I guess. All right, so we need to connect all of these. We actually want 2 transitions from idle to idle sit down. And the reason is because maybe we want the deer to, during the day, actually sit down instead of sleep. So maybe it gets tired or just wants to relax a little bit, so it sits down instead of sleeps. So the sit down would be triggered by int data being equal to 1 up here. So then we want to transition from idle to sit down to sit down. We want one from sit down to stand up to idle, sit down to sleep. You just kind of make all of these, connect them up. There we go. All right, so now let's go ahead and actually set the parameters for these. Dylan, I've actually set up a school of 200 sardine using ice. So, and that was really the only point where it started lagging a little bit noticeably. And that was because all of the sardine were in the camera at once. If you have a bunch of them that are occluded out so that they don't get rendered or anything when the camera's not facing them, then you could ideally have much more than 200. And that was, of course, each sardine having its own ice component and its own behaviors and keeping track of the location of all the other sardine in its school so that it didn't run into them. Yeah, definitely graphics card is more of an issue. All right, so give ourselves a little space here. So we want in the idle, both transitions here, we actually want there to be no, yeah, we don't want a has as exit time on either of these. But we do want to set the int data here. So we want int data equals, for this one, we want int data 1 and int data equals 2 for the second one. No, come on, equals. Let's make sure they're set up. Yep. All right. So moving on. This one we just actually want to have exit time and nothing else. This way, once it transitions to idle sit down, it has to complete the animation before going on to sit down. But here for this one, we don't want that, and we want this one to be set so that if int data equals 0, it goes back into the stand up. And sit down, we want to go to sit down to sleep once the int data is set to 0. I mean, 2. Because 2 is our trigger for sleeping. Same thing with idle to sit down to sleep. We just want the has exit time ticked. We don't care about any more conditions. However, the time when you get kicked out of sleep is when int data is no longer equal to 2. So if int data is not equal to 2, it will kick back out. So if int data is 1, it'll wake up and just sit there. But if int data is equal to 0, it'll go into the sit down pose for like a brief second, then kick into the stand up and then back into idle. And in sit down to, if we preview that here. Yep. All right. So this one we just want the has exit time ticked. And then sit down to stand up. All we want is actually, no, we don't want that. What we do want though is that one on here from stand up to idle. All right. So all the transitions I do believe are done. So now we can just head back into the behaviors and actually make sure those are all set up. So sleep, yep, that's good. So now in our interaction for the home setting, what we want to do is add a new interactor. Selection criteria, that is fine, and we want the creature behavior to be sleep. So here what we want is, just like with all the, we want the advanced options, so we can toggle a check here, and we want to find environment time hour. So we're actually going to have several checks here. Hi Grivix, if you wanted to sleep you should, unless it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't sleep then. But I suspect it's more like 2 or 3 in the morning. All right. So we want time hour. So this runs on a 24-hour clock. So if the time hour, we have to check for 2 conditions here. If we want time hour is greater than, let's say, what is it? 6, 5 or 6. We'll go with 5 for now. So that would be what, 17? So if environment time hour is greater than or equal to 17, we want it to go into sleep. But we also want an or. If environment time hour is less than or equal to, we'll go with 7. He'll also sleep. So if for some reason time goes backwards, then he'll also fall asleep. But most of the time, all you really need is just environment time hour. Although, no, that's not necessarily true, because then once it resets to 1, the deer will wake up, so it'll wake up in the middle of the night. So you want to make sure that this is actually ticked here for 7, less than 7, so that when the clock restarts, he won't wake up. And he won't wake up until it's between 7 to 17 hours. All right. Let's see if that works. Let's keep track of the time here. So it's 8 right now. Getting stuck on something there, buddy. Oh, he probably reached his position because I didn't give him an idle animation there. But like I said, that's easily fixable by just adding an interactor in. It's 11. Let's kind of speed this along a little bit. I'm gonna increase the time, or maybe not. Maybe decrease the length. Might make it go faster, or I just messed everything up. All right, so we're getting close to 17 here. Sun starting to go down. We're getting low. Yeah, there we go. And he is now sleeping. And the time is now 17 or 8, so about what? 6 o'clock? Yeah, 6 o'clock. Obviously, we'll want to tweak that depending on what you want. Or conversely, you could have a creature that falls asleep during the day if it's nocturnal and wakes up at night. we could wait until it's 7, but for the sake of time, let's not, because otherwise we might be here for a while. Suffice it to say, though, once it reaches 7, then he'll do the opposite. He'll get back up, and then start wandering around again. Alright, so using these, you can instead use, like I said before, root motion if your character has that. And to do so, all you actually have to do is go into the behaviors, find the behaviors, and toggle on the root motion. If you do, you do not necessarily need to actually use the movement settings here. But those are good for helping determine the forward speed and angular speed and whatnot dynamically. All right, so that was setting up a creature with Mecanim. I will quickly show some of the fish AI since I have some time here. Gotta find it first, of course. I believe it was in the herds here. No, maybe not. Where is it that I set? Maybe scene 01. Oh, yep, I think this was it. Yeah, yep, here it is. You guys like my fish tank? Got a nice fish tank here. Anyway, so the fish tank is what houses the fish. I'm gonna have this guy here who will kind of just swim around on his lonesome. And then I do have a school of sardine here who will attempt to school. However, I'm still kind of tweaking the schooling to make it look a little bit more realistic. But it does function, and you probably could use it as is for most other schools of fish, unless you really want a really realistic schooling behavior. But just for the sake, let me turn down the spawn, because as you can see, like I told Dylan, I had the sardine spawning at 200 per, but I'm actually going to just set that to 100 for now. I don't want spawn conditions. Right, so if I press play, unless I did something that I'm not aware of. You mean spawn a deer if it's safe? Could definitely do that, although you could add in another condition to check to see if there's a buck nearby, and then spawn a deer. That way a herd of deer will actually require a buck in order to give birth. And maybe you set it so that it actually only spawns a fawn instead of a deer, and then once the deer gets a certain age, switch it out for either a buck or a doe. But right now there's 100 fish in this school. And let's see what the stats are on this. 50 FPS with 100 little fish schooling about with their own little behaviors attached to them. And of course then that guy over there. Doe, a deer, a female deer. I think this guy actually managed to get out of his pen. He's very antisocial. Doesn't normally happen. But yeah, to set, let me kind of just grab a sardine here and kind of show you its behaviors. So it's got all of these behaviors. It has the swim behaviors and then the follow behaviors so that they don't follow one another. But actually what they're doing is actually following a single object. I have in the scene a separate invisible ice AI. Let me find him. Fish school right here. This fish school is an actual ice AI, but you can't actually see it in the scene. In the game anyway. It's invisible. And that is what the school of sardine are actually following around. And it has its own kind of rudimentary behavior here. It just runs and walks and around in the home, and the sardine just kind of follow it about. And the sardine, if in case you're wondering how they're floating along like that, they float because in the behaviors that I have set for them, they're that's the fish school. That's not what I want. I want the sardine. Grab a sardine here. The follow behaviors here, like I showed in the herd version. The difference here is that they're, let me find it, vertical. I've enabled the vertical movement option here. If you enable vertical, you can give the creature vertical moment, the ability to move up and down. And by setting the operating level here, you can tell how many units above the ground or absolute zero that they can fly about, if you will, or in this case swim. If you have the ground option here toggled, then it will use it based on the ground level, the height of the terrain. If you don't, then it goes based off of absolute zero. So basically Y0. But I like to use the ground because some terrain are going to be higher in elevation than others, and that just makes it a little bit more dynamic. But if your entire terrain is just flat and you know you're not going to have any variations in it, you can just use the absolute zero option. Like if you're developing for VR where you're not allowed to have anything other than a flat terrain, a flat ground. But yeah, so next time, once I get done fiddling around with the schooling here and some more advanced flight AI, I will definitely do a stream on setting, a more in-depth stream on setting up the AI involved in the fish, birds, and dragons. Although dragons might be a little bit later because I'm going to have to experiment with them quite a bit before I can actually stream them. But any questions so far? Or I mean, any questions at all? Before I stop the stream. Any suggestions besides butterflies? Because I promise, Grivix, I will do butterflies for you. Might even have them be man-eating, flesh-eating butterflies. You missed everything, Grivix. Everything. Because they're a lot easy. Because they're animation wise, they are a lot easier to set up. Because they don't have to interact with landing on anything. And they pretty much have like one animation. Why aren't they in cans? Because no one's caught them yet. Although I suppose I have, since I put them in this large aquarium. We don't really need sardine sounds, Grivix. I don't think they make much sounds that are worthy of actually making anything. Now, if we have whales, you certainly could try to make whale sounds. But I'm not sure sardines make any noteworthy sounds. Yeah, Dylan. We need howls for wolf packs. Should get on that, Grivix. You're our sound guy. No wolf? Alright. Well, I hope you guys learned a bit from this one. And I hope you guys now have a better idea on how to use Mecanim with advanced ice controlling. And using parameters instead of using direct control. So if anyone has any suggestions of anything they would like to see, feel free to or at least for those of you that are watching this on YouTube or in the ICE forums or anywhere else, feel free to either comment on what you would like to see in the comments, or leave a post on the forum thread of what if there's anything you would particularly like to see or would like me to explain further upon. Until next time, though, hope you guys have fun experimenting with ice as much as I have, and have a nice day or night, depending on what time of day it is when you're watching this.